Absolutely. Tried to get my kids to wear one of them like that. We're not putting this on.
I can't blame them. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Trip Watson, entrepreneur attorney for the Watson firm, and one of the things I always talk to my clients about is making sure that you're maintaining compliance. We talked about it last night with a FLSA prosecuting attorney, that if there's no documentation whatsoever, that's the biggest problem that creates for labor compliance. So there's a lot of attorneys that deal with this, but some of the people that deal with these kind of issues on a day-to-day basis are folks at payroll companies. So today we've got Gennari of PrimePay to come talk to us a little bit about making sure that all records are kept and making sure everything's taken care of. So, Eric?
Absolutely. Basically what I tell people when I go into any client's office and talk to them is, are you ready if the Department of Labor stopped on your front doorstep? Are you ready if they audit you? Most clients are, well, why would they stop by? Why would they come by my office? Why would they want to see these records? Why would they ask me these questions? Well, I tell people, there are really 4 different reasons why a company is going to get audited. The first one is if one of your employees files an unemployment claim. And the DOL goes in there and finds out that they're not a W-2 employee. Second reason is if your company has a workers' comp claim. That's another reason why they're going to stop by. Third reason is you do have a 1099 employee and they see that you have over 1099 employees being sent out every year. And the fourth reason is if you just have one 1099 employee and that 1099 employee does not file a federal income tax at the end of the year. So those are 4 different reasons that the DOL will stop by. Now once they stop by, the question you ask yourself is, what do I have to have ready in place? First and foremost, you have to have all of your W-2 employees' names, socials, addresses. You have to have a defined work week, whether it be weekly, bi-weekly, semi-monthly, monthly. You have to have records of the time those employees have worked, the overtime that those employees have worked. You have to have all of that, whether it be paper-based, electronic-based. You have to have that ready for them to go. The next question people ask me is, Eric, how long do I have to keep track of this stuff? Well, it's only 2 years. The Department of Labor has shortened that time frame. It used to be 7. Yeah, it has been shortened down to 2 years. But if you don't even have 2 years, the first penalty you're going to have is $10,000 right off the bat. You have to write them a check that day for $10,000 if you do not have these records. Most people ask me, what is the best way to keep track of this? Well, the simple way is there's so many internet-based solutions out there that you can track this, and it stores as long as you're on that system. So that right there, that's the first thing the Department of Labor is going to look into, is the records that you're keeping, work week, everything like that. Now, the second question the Department of Labor is going to go into is, I see that you've had X amount of 1099s this year. What I want to do is I want to go through and see if these are actually 1099 employees. Now, people always ask, and I can't remember all of these questions, and I'm going to have these available for you to view, but should that vendor get a 1099 or a W-2? What is a true independent contractor? How do I find out these things? The IRS has a simple 20-point checklist that you need to ask yourself, and we'll go over these questions real quick. Must the individual take instruction from a management team? Does the individual receive training from your company? Is the success or continuation of your business somewhat dependent on the type of service provided by that individual? Must the individual personally perform the contracted services? Have you hired, supervised, or paid individuals to assist the worker in completing the project stated in the contract? Is there a continuing relationship between your company and the individual? So is there a specified time frame that this employee is contracted to work? Do you set the employee's work hours? That's the question I always tell people to first ask themselves. Do you set this employee's work hours? Is the individual required to work full-time at your company? Is the work performed on the company premises? Is the individual required to follow a set sequential routine in the performance of his work? Must the individual give you reports regarding his or her work? Is the individual paid by the hour, by the week, by the month? Do you reimburse this individual for travel? Do you supply the individual with the tools needed to do the job? An example of that one is I've met with a moving company just recently, and they say, well, we don't provide them the tools because we rent the van that they're going to go move in. That is still deemed the tools required to do the job if that company is paying for it. That company thought they were getting away with it because it wasn't their own personal van. Have you made a significant investment in facilities used by the individual performing services? Is the individual free from suffering a loss or realizing a profit based on the work? Does the individual only perform services for your company? Does the individual limit the availability of his services to the general public? Do you have the right to discharge the individual? And may the individual terminate his services at any time? If you've answered yes to any of these questions, that employee is a W-2 employee.
I don't agree. Horrible. Take a home builder. I work for a home builder as a CFO. The first question, and repeat the first question.
First question, must the individual take instructions from your management staff regarding when, where, and how the work is to be done?
Yes, so you have a painter, right? That's independent from you. You don't have him. He doesn't always paint for you, but it's a fine line.
It's a fine line.
Do they take instruction from management? Absolutely. You're going to paint this house green, and you're going to finish it by
this date. Now, are you talking about you hiring that painter as a 1099, or are you telling me that the company that painter's working for, they're telling him each house to go to?
No, I hire the company as a
Okay. Then you're okay. You would be, that is because it's a certain job, it's got a certain time frame.
Right.
So once that time frame
But
ends.
the answer's still yes, though.
The answer is still yes. But you're going to go down, and what was the other one?
There's a couple of, I counted 4 yeses.
4 yeses. In general, no answers to question 1 through 16, and yes answer to questions 17 through 20 indicate an independent contractor. However, a simple majority no answer to question 1 through 16, which of course you'll have to get this, answers to question 17 through 20 does not guarantee independent contractor. So they'll actually take some things on a case-by-case basis. I think the general thing is if there's a start point and an end point to that job, that's the biggest thing that people are misconstrued about is if there's a start point and an end point, yes, they can be deemed a 1099 contractor. Most people that are 1099 employees outside of you, they're employing them for longer periods of time. After this job is done, they're moving on to the next job, the next job, the next job. You pay them as an independent contractor. Now, did they provide you with legal documentation, a W-9?
An I-9.
No, they needed to provide a W-9.
Well, I don't even know.
A W-9 is a form that basically gives you either their Social Security guaranteeing that they're the sole proprietor or a federal ID number that you're paying. You got that? Okay. So there's no true hard and fast way. That is the checklist. That's what the IRS is going to ask. Now, is the IRS going to come to you who paid somebody on a one-off instance? Probably not. They're looking for companies that are employing these people for a duration period of time. You know, a contractor that's got somebody in there that's showing up on the job site for over 6 months at a time and then changes to another job site. We as individuals, when we hire somebody, it is 1099.
Yeah.
Other things you have to look at too within the FLSA guidelines. Myself, I'm a salaried employee. how do you deem between an exempt and a non-exempt employee? Does anybody have any questions, clues of how you do that?
There's 5 questions, there used to be.
There are still 5 questions, I believe. Let's see. Whose primary duty is managing the enterprise in which he is employed or of customarily recognized department thereof? Whose customary and regularly directs the work of two or more individuals, has the authority to hire and fire people, and regularly exercises discretionary powers, and who does not devote his time to 20 or more % to retail activities. So those are the basic guidelines to find out whether you can have somebody on a salary or on an hourly rate. Now, why has that come to the forefront here lately? Do you know why? No?
Overtime.
Overtime. Give an example, and this is the best example that's happened in our state here today. Honda Manufacturing had 2 different classifications of workers, and they got busted on both of them. The first one was they misclassified who they said was managing each piece of the line up there, when they were in all actuality still just working the line. You know, they weren't overseeing anybody's work. They were paying them a flat fee. Those employees in turn turned in Honda. They were able to show that they were still just line workers. They had to go back 2 years to recover that overtime. Now the other one was, which was pretty funny on the overtime basis, the employees were showing up to work 30 minutes prior to. They weren't able to clock in yet. They were getting their work clothes on, their work boots. They would clock in when they walked through the door into the manufacturing line. Was that legal for Honda to do that?
No.
No. You know how much that lawsuit cost Honda?
A bunch.
Cost them $540 million.
Why?
Now-
Why?
It,
Technically, you have to pay them.
you have to pay them that overtime, and then they said pain and suffering with the civil lawsuit of the overtime that they were not receiving that caused them while they didn't have that money. So
They were on the job as soon as they showed up to work.
Yeah.
Even though they weren't on the line, they were doing stuff.
What if your schedule is 8 to 3 or 8 to 4, and you show up at 7:30?
if you show up at 7:30 and you are on the job, they have to pay you for that.
Even though your policy says your shift starts at 8.
Still,
Then you have to tell them not to get on the line.
you have to
stay
tell
out the-
them, you
stay in the
have,
car out in the parking lot.
absolutely.
Really?
You have to tell them they need to stay in their car, and you can write them up for this offense.
I mean, that's a significant issue in healthcare.
If you provide changing rooms and whatnot, and they're expected to change clothes at work and that kind of stuff, you still have to pay for that. If part of the deal is that they have to show up in uniform and that kind of stuff, that's how you can say sit in the car. But if they show up and they have to dress one way and then dress into something else, you have to pay for the time in changing clothes.
Even if you have that set work hour. If they show up 30 minutes early and they walk through that door, even if that person sometimes...
Even if you've got a clock-in policy that says, if you're scheduled to begin at 8, you can't clock in before, whatever it is, 7.5 minutes before 8. Then you still have to pay them if they show
You
up.
still have to pay them if they show up. Now, here's the thing. You can also take action against that employee
Right,
for misuse of policy. You still have to pay them, but that action can become a reason to terminate that employee. As long as you keep the appropriate documentation, you would, verbal warning, written warning, termination is what most people will do. Now, why is all of this important right now? I mean, everybody, this is on the forefront of every employer's mind. You know, 1099, W-2, why do I need to keep these records? Why is this on the forefront of everybody's mind? Does anybody know how much the Department of Labor has increased their workforce within the past year?
15,000? Is that correct?
15%, about 15,000. Now, my question to you is, what companies do you think they're going after? Are they going after the Hondas, or are they going after the companies that have 20 employees?
The Hondas.
No, wrong. They are going after the companies that have a smaller workforce, and the reason they are doing that is because it takes considerably less time to do an audit on a 20-man company and to find things that are going wrong there
Yeah.
and to recover the money faster than it would be to audit a Honda that has 5,000 employees. So they're going after a target market of about 10 to about 100 employees because those audits take less time, more productive, and more revenue generating towards them.
Really?
They went after your client, Justin Hardy. The Department of Labor went after him for a short pay of $1.76 on their state unemployment. The gentleman continually called Justin for about 2 months for $1.76. I actually paid it for him. I sent it in pennies
Why did he owe $1.76?
because his old payroll company made a mistake. We won't name names. But that's FLSA short guidelines. The best article I've seen on this is your company prepared for a visit from the Department of Labor. I'm going to allow Tripp to post all of these articles I have. I have an article that shows the increase in the labor force, Bloomberg Business Week studies. Basically, the Bloomberg Business Week actually will tell you how much the lawsuits are going for these days. You know, ranging from anywhere from 1 million to all the way up to 540 million. So it can cost a company quite a bit of money. Again, thanks for having me in, Tripp.
Well, thanks, Eric. The reason that a lot of this ends up becoming very important is there's two issues. DOL is stepping up, but there's also what us in legal circles recognize as being an oversupply of attorneys in the marketplace right now. So you have a lot of folks that are coming out of law school that have a whole lot of student loans and no way to pay them. And the way that a lot of folks are doing that is they are going after employment practices. They're going after overtime work because there's statutory penalties that come involved with some of those depending on the records that you keep. And one of the biggest issues is not keeping records. So if, like I mentioned earlier, I was talking to an attorney last night who does FLSA prosecutions. If you do not have records, you've already lost. There's no way that you could ever go back and prove, well, they were clocking in on time, they were doing this. If you're paying people under the table, or if you're just saying, oh, well, they work 40.0 hours every single week on a consistent basis, chances are you're probably going to be running into some trouble on that. One of the easiest ways to maintain compliance, and the reason I got Eric in here is because one of the easiest ways to do it is to have a payroll company. There's a lot of compliance that comes in, and it takes a lot of man hours for you to handle that kind of stuff in-house. You have to keep W-9s, I-9s, keeping the information taken care of. If you have somebody else that can back that stuff up, it helps. The other side of it is if you make a mistake, your company is on the hook for that. A lot of payroll companies, Eric's I know also does it, is they have options where they'll take liability on some of the payroll if they make the mistakes and that kind of stuff. So if you want to make the mistakes and pay for it in the back end, that can be very expensive. You can also hire an attorney. You can get somebody like me in there to come take care of these things, but I guarantee you my hourly rate's a lot higher than Eric's. So,
Yes, it is.
but anyway, thanks again, Eric. I really appreciate it. I will post these on the blog, and we'll have everything else taken care of. So thanks again.
Cool, thanks.